$30,000 feet above the Atlantic. Scalding coffee drips down 11-year-old Elias Vance's face as power broker Randall Stone smirks. "Accidents happen, boy," he snarls loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. No one moves except Naomi Carter, the senior flight attendant watching from the galley. Her hand steady as she approaches, face professionally neutral despite witnessing what everyone pretends not to see. "Sir," she says with practiced calm that barely masks her rage, "I'll need you to come with me immediately." Neither realizes this moment will destroy careers, spark national outrage, and forever change airline policy. What invisible lines had been crossed that day, and who would pay the ultimate price for speaking truth to power? Before we begin this powerful story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. If you believe in standing up for justice even when the world looks away, hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on more stories of courage in the face of discrimination. Elias Vance clutched his carry-on bag tightly as he and his mother, Lena Vance, navigated the crowded, echoing terminal at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. The early morning sun, a pale, weak yellow, barely filtered through the massive windows, casting long, sharp shadows on the gleaming tile floor. A cold snap had swept through the Midwest, and the air inside felt dry and crisp, a stark contrast to the distant, warm promise of their destination. Today marked a pivotal moment in 11-year-old Elias's life. After months of intense regional competitions, his exceptional chess abilities had earned him a full scholarship to the National Youth Chess Championship in New York City. "Remember to thank Mr. Harrison when we arrive," Lena reminded him, adjusting her professional blazer. As a single mother working as a civil rights attorney, she had sacrificed countless hours to support Elias's talent, often taking him to chess club meetings between tense court appearances. Lena carried the quiet, formidable tension of a woman who chose her battles carefully, but fought them fiercely. "I will, Mom," Elias replied, his eyes bright with anticipation. He'd stayed up late studying Grandmaster techniques, determined to make his mark against competitors from prestigious private academies. Their excitement dampened when they reached the Atlantic Airways check-in counter. The attendant frowned at her screen, tapping keys with increasing frustration. "That's strange," she muttered. "Your reservation shows you've been moved to standby status." Lena's brow furrowed. "That's impossible. We confirmed our seats yesterday and received boarding passes via email." The attendant offered a mechanical shrug. "System shows your confirmed seats were released. It happens sometimes with our booking software." As they reluctantly moved to the standby area, the atmosphere shifted. Elias noticed something troubling. Several passengers who arrived after them approached the same counter, received their boarding passes without issue, and proceeded to security. Every single one of them was white. After 45 minutes of waiting, Lena approached the gate agent again, phone in hand. "I have our confirmation email right here, sent yesterday at 7:42 p.m., seats 14A and 14B. The gate agent's smile tightened. "Ma'am, perhaps you misunderstood the email. Confirmations aren't guarantees." "I've flown enough to know the difference between a confirmation and a standby notification," Lena replied evenly, though Elias recognized the subtle, measured cadence that signaled her lawyer mode was activating. A supervisor was called. More passengers boarded, finally, after Lena calmly but persistently presented their email confirmation and mentioned Atlantic Airways' own boarding policies. They were grudgingly permitted to board. Relief was short-lived. "I'm sorry, but we've had to adjust seating to accommodate some last-minute changes," explained a flight attendant, directing Lena toward the back of the plane. "Your son will be in premium economy seat 8B while you'll be in 32F. "That's unacceptable," Lena protested, her voice rising slightly. "He's 11 years old and we booked our tickets together months ago specifically to sit together." The flight attendant glanced nervously at the growing line behind them. "I apologize for the inconvenience, but the flight is completely full. There's nothing we can do at this point without delaying departure." Lena looked at Elias, a moment of calculation visible in her eyes. Elias knew she was weighing whether this was a battle worth fighting, or if causing a scene would only make things worse for them both. "It's okay, Mom," Elias whispered, though his heart raced at the thought of sitting alone. "It's just a few hours." With visible reluctance, Lena knelt to his level. "Listen to me," she said quietly. "Remember what we discussed. Head high, no trouble. If anything happens that makes you uncomfortable, Press the call button immediately. Elias nodded solemnly, understanding her unspoken message. As a young black boy traveling alone, he needed to be twice as careful, twice as polite, twice as invisible to avoid unwanted attention. As a flight attendant escorted him to his seat between two businessmen, Elias glanced back to see his mother still watching him, her face a careful mask that couldn't quite hide her deep-seated concern. Neither of them realized how prophetic her caution would prove to be. The boarding process was nearly complete when Randall Stone strode down the jetway, trailing the heavy scent of expensive cologne. At 53, he carried himself with the unmistakable, overbearing confidence of someone accustomed to wielding power without question. His tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than most passengers earned in a month, and his Italian leather briefcase swung casually at his side as he consulted his Rolex with an impatient frown. As senior vice president of Stonebridge Capital, Randall was used to priority treatment. Today's delay had been unavoidable, an emergency board call about their latest acquisition, but his irritation was palpable as he made his way down the aisle to his premium economy seat. Upon reaching row 8, Randall's expression shifted from mild annoyance to barely disguised displeasure. His eyes narrowed at Elias, who sat quietly reading a dog-eared chess strategy book. "Excuse me," Randall said, his voice carrying deliberately. He made a show of checking his boarding pass multiple times, turning it over and holding it up to the light. "I believe there's been some mistake. I reserve seat 8B. Elias looked up momentarily confused. "This is 8B, sir. That's what my boarding pass says, too." Randall's mouth tightened as he signaled to a passing flight attendant. Not Naomi, but a younger man named Chris, who was clearly new to the job. "There appears to be a seating conflict," Randall announced. Chris turned to Elias first, not Randall, and asked with barely concealed suspicion, "Can I see your boarding pass, please?" Elias produced his pass, handling it carefully. Randall exhaled loudly. "Well, someone clearly made an error. I specifically requested this row. I'm a Diamond Elite member." He emphasized the last two words while staring pointedly at Elias's worn sneakers. After examining both boarding passes, Chris confirmed that Elias was indeed assigned to 8B. Randall reluctantly took 8C, muttering just loud enough to be heard. "Must be some kind of affirmative action seating policy now." Elias pretended not to hear, focusing intently on his book as Randall settled beside him, deliberately extending his elbow over their shared armrest. "Pardon me," Elias said softly, trying to reclaim a sliver of space. "You'll have to make do," Randall replied curtly. "I have work to do." He proceeded to spread financial documents across his tray table, encroaching further into Elias's space. Throughout takeoff, Randall made 4 separate phone calls despite repeated announcements to switch devices to airplane mode. Each conversation featured the same loud discussion of an 8-figure merger and restructuring an underperforming division. He glanced sideways at Elias after each million-dollar figure, as if ensuring the boy understood how important his seatmate was. When the drink service began, Randall ordered a scotch despite the early hour, followed by another. The alcohol seemed to fuel his territorial expansion as he repeatedly adjusted his position, each movement pushing Elias further against the window. Have you ever encountered someone who seemed determined to make you feel unwelcome in a space you had every right to occupy? Comment 1 if you've experienced or witnessed this type of intimidation tactics designed to make someone feel they don't belong. Like and subscribe if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with basic dignity, regardless of age or race. What invisible boundaries do some people create to establish dominance over others? And how far will Randall go to assert his perceived superiority over an 11-year-old boy whose only offense was occupying a seat he felt entitled to? The tension is building, but this is only the beginning of a confrontation that will change many lives forever. Naomi Carter moved efficiently through the aircraft cabin, her Atlantic Airways uniform crisp, despite this being her 4th consecutive red-eye shift. At 35, she carried herself with the poised professionalism that came from 12 years navigating not just turbulence in the air, but the often more challenging currents of workplace politics. Behind her practiced smile lay exhaustion and simmering frustration. Yesterday, after months of documentation and hesitation, she had finally filed a formal discrimination complaint with Human Resources. 3 times in the past 2 years she had been passed over for the chief purser position, despite perfect evaluations and seniority over the white colleagues who received the promotions instead. "Naomi, we need more ice in first class," called Chris, the newer flight attendant, who, despite being on the job for only 6 months, already spoke with the casual authority of someone who expected compliance. "On it," she replied, maintaining her professional demeanor, while mentally noting this was the 4th time today. He'd directed her to handle tasks outside her assigned section. Small power plays happened so frequently, she sometimes wondered if she was imagining them until she compared notes with other black flight attendants. During pre-flight preparations, Naomi had noticed the seating arrangement that separated Elias from his mother. She'd approached the lead flight attendant, Beverly, suggesting they find a solution. "The manifest shows multiple opportunities to reseat them together," Naomi had pointed out. "There's an empty pair in row 22. Beverly had dismissed her concerns with barely a glance at the seating chart. "We're already behind schedule. If they had an issue, they should have addressed it at the gate. We can't rearrange the entire cabin for every passenger preference." Naomi knew better than to push further. After yesterday's HR complaint, she was already walking on eggshells. Instead, she made a mental note to check on the boy during service. As the flight progressed, Naomi recognized in Elias a familiar behavior pattern, the calculated stillness of a black child trying to be invisible to avoid trouble. She had perfected the same technique herself growing up in the inner city, learning early that standing out often meant standing in the line of fire. She observed his careful movements, the way he minimized his presence beside the increasingly intrusive businessman, how he folded his chess book to occupy less space on the shared armrest. These weren't the natural actions of a carefree 11-year-old, but the practiced movements of someone who'd already learned hard lessons about navigating hostile environments. During the first beverage service, Naomi paused at row 8. "What would you like to drink?" she asked Elias with genuine warmth, making direct eye contact to acknowledge him as a valued passenger. "Just water, please," he answered softly, his eyes briefly lighting up at being addressed directly and respectfully. "And perhaps a cookie," she added, slipping him an extra packet with a conspiratorial wink. "Thank you, ma'am," Elias replied, a flash of gratitude crossing his face for this small kindness. Randall cleared his throat impatiently, clearly annoyed at not being served first. "I'll have another scotch neat and make it a double this time." Naomi maintained her professional smile. "Sir, I'd be happy to bring you another beverage shortly, but we're currently serving this section by row." Randall's jaw tightened at this minor challenge to his priority status. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, his voice carrying just enough for nearby passengers to hear. "A valued Atlantic Airways passenger." "Sir," Naomi replied evenly, "whom I'll be delighted to serve as soon as I've attended to this row in sequence." As she proceeded with the service, Naomi maintained her peripheral awareness of row 8. Randall's body language grew increasingly hostile, his movements more deliberate in their encroachment of Elias's space. She'd seen this behavior before. The systematic testing of boundaries, the escalating provocations meant to elicit a reaction that could then be labeled as the real problem. She made a decision. Some things mattered more than job security, and the determined dignity of the child, trying so hard to remain unmolested in his rightful space, stirred something protective in her that transcended professional caution. 2 hours into the flight, the cabin settled into the drowsy rhythm of transcontinental travel. In row 8, however, the tension continued to escalate. Randall repeatedly jammed his finger against his laptop keyboard, each aggressive tap punctuated by an increasingly frustrated sigh. The Wi-Fi connection, spotty at best, had apparently failed him at a critical moment. "Useless," he muttered, glaring sideways at Elias as if the boy were somehow responsible for the technological limitations of in-flight internet. "Completely useless. Can't get anything done in these conditions." Elias had abandoned his chess book and was now attempting to complete a math worksheet. He'd shifted his body as far toward the window as physically possible, making himself small. "You're taking up too much space," Randall said suddenly, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "I can't even use my laptop properly with you constantly fidgeting." Elias froze, pencil mid-equation. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll try to stay still." The meal service began. When Naomi reached their row, she placed Elias's tray down first, giving him an encouraging smile. "Careful with that," Randall said as she set his tray in front of him. "I have important documents here." "Of course, sir," Naomi replied professionally, noting how Randall had deliberately left his papers spread across his tray table, despite seeing the approaching meal service. As Naomi moved to the next row, Randall shifted suddenly, his elbow knocking against Elias's tray and sending a cup of orange juice splashing across the math worksheet and onto the boy's book. "Oh," Elias exclaimed, quickly lifting his papers. "You should be more careful with your drink," Randall admonished loud enough for others to hear, completely inverting the reality of what had just occurred. I didn't," Elias began, then fell silent, recognizing the futility of challenging the adult's version of events. "Here," Randall said with exaggerated magnanimity, offering a single cocktail napkin. "Accidents happen." 15 minutes later, Naomi returned with the coffee service. She noticed Elias's damp papers. "Would you like some extra napkins?" she offered. "That would be great." "Thank you," Elias replied softly. "And for you, sir?" Naomi turned to Randall. "Coffee?" "Black, no sugar," he answered curtly. Naomi poured the steaming coffee carefully and placed it on his tray. "Please be careful. It's very hot." She had just turned to serve the next row when a commotion erupted behind her. A sharp gasp of pain cut through the cabin noise. Naomi spun around to see Elias half standing, coffee streaming down his face and chest. The scalding liquid had splashed across his cheek, neck, and arm. The dark stain spread rapidly across his light blue shirt. His eyes were wide with shock and pain. Randall sat with the now empty coffee cup tilted in his hand, his expression a calculated blend of surprise and indignation. "The boy bumped me," he announced loudly before anyone could speak. "He jumped up suddenly and knocked right into my arm. These kids nowadays, completely undisciplined." The lie was so blatant that for a moment the entire section seemed frozen in collective disbelief. Several passengers had witnessed the truth, how Randall had deliberately tilted his cup as Elias reached for his fallen pencil, how he had actually lifted the cup to ensure maximum spillage. Yet no one spoke up. Only Naomi, who had caught the entire sequence in her peripheral vision, moved decisively. She rushed to Elias. "Let me help you," she said. Her voice calm but her eyes reflecting a controlled fury. She gently pressed a bottle of cold water against the boy's cheek where an angry red mark was already forming. "It was an accident," Elias whispered to her, his eyes pleading, clearly trying to defuse the situation. Naomi made brief eye contact with him. A silent communication passed between them. In that moment, Elias saw something he desperately needed: recognition. She had seen. She knew. "Let's get you to the lavatory to clean up properly," Naomi said, helping Elias to his feet. "Those burns need immediate attention." As she guided him toward the front lavatory, Naomi glanced back at Randall, who was now smugly rearranging his documents. He had claimed the entire row in Elias's absence. What had begun as boundary testing had escalated to physical harm, and the cabin's collective silence had emboldened him. But Randall had miscalculated in one critical aspect. He hadn't recognized that in Naomi Carter. He had encountered someone who had spent a lifetime documenting injustice, and who was quite frankly out of patience. The first officer's calm professionalism had provided temporary relief, but Naomi knew the fight wasn't over. A passenger was already recording, and corporate maneuvers were inevitable. "I've documented the injuries and reassigned seating in accordance with safety protocols," Naomi stated. The first officer, Taylor, nodded. "Then you followed proper procedure." He looked Randall Stone directly in the eye. "Mr. Stone, I'm going to have to ask you to take your assigned seat. If you have complaints about our crew's professional conduct, customer relations will be happy to address them after we land." Randall's confident smile faltered. He had clearly expected solidarity, perhaps racial solidarity, from the white officer. "This is outrageous. I'll be speaking to your superiors." "That's your right, sir. For now, please return to your seat as instructed." As Randall reluctantly complied, Taylor quietly added to Naomi, "Nice work. Let me know if you need anything else." The small victory provided temporary relief, but the younger flight attendant, Chris, approached Naomi again. "Beverly wants to talk to you," he said, referring to the lead flight attendant. "She thinks we should reconsider our approach here." "What approach would that be?" Naomi asked. "Following protocol for passenger injury?" Chris lowered his voice. "Look, I get it. What he did wasn't right. But both sides share some blame here, and this is becoming a bigger deal than it needs to be. Maybe we should just let it go to avoid complications. A child was assaulted, Chris. That's not a both sides situation, and it's already a big deal. I've documented everything according to company policy and FAA regulations. That's technically correct, Chris conceded, clearly uncomfortable. But sometimes technically correct isn't practically smart, career-wise. I appreciate your concern for my career, Naomi replied, her tone sharp. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to check on our injured passenger. As she turned away, she heard Chris mutter, "Your funeral." Perhaps it would be, professionally speaking. But as Naomi approached Elias with a fresh cold compress, she knew some principles transcended career preservation. The boy looked up at her with quiet gratitude that validated her decision. Regardless of what consequences might await her after landing, the fastened seatbelt sign had been illuminated for $20 minutes due to moderate turbulence when a commotion erupted from the back of the plane. Naomi turned to see Lena Vance moving purposefully up the aisle, her expression a storm gathering force. "Ma'am, I need you to return to your seat." Chris intercepted her, placing his body directly in her path. "The seatbelt sign is on for your safety." "My son was injured," Lena replied, her voice controlled but vibrating with intensity. "I need to see him now." "We're experiencing turbulence," Chris insisted, raising his hand to block her progress. "Once the captain turns off the sign—" "Don't touch me," Lena stated, not loudly but with unmistakable authority. "Federal regulations permit passenger movement during emergencies, and my 11-year-old son's injury constitutes an emergency." Chris hesitated, caught between protocol and the increasingly apparent reality that he was facing someone who knew exactly what her rights were. Just 2 rows ahead, a white businessman had risen to use the lavatory without any intervention, a contrast not lost on nearby passengers. Naomi, observing the escalating tension, moved swiftly to intervene. "Ms. Vance," she addressed Lena directly, "please follow me. Your son is in row 8. She turned to Chris with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'll escort Ms. Vance to ensure her safety during the turbulence." As they moved forward, Lena spoke quietly to Naomi. "What happened? The call button has been disabled in my section, and no one would tell me anything except that there had been a minor incident." "A male passenger deliberately poured hot coffee on Elias," Naomi replied frankly. "I've documented the injury and moved the passenger to another seat." Lena's step faltered momentarily, shock and fury crossing her face before she regained her composure. "How badly is he hurt?" "First-degree burns primarily, possibly second-degree on his neck. I've applied burn ointment and cold compresses." They reached row 8 where Elias sat alone. "Mom!" Relief flooded his face. Lena immediately knelt in the aisle beside him, gently examining his injuries. Her lawyer's composure momentarily fractured as she took in the angry red marks on her son's skin. "I'm okay," Elias assured her quickly. "Ms. Carter helped me." Lena looked at the burns again, her expression hardening. She then turned to Naomi, her demeanor shifting noticeably from concerned mother to calculating litigator. "I want the passenger's name," she stated, "and I need the air marshal to document these injuries officially." "Of course," Naomi agreed. "I've already filed an incident report with photographs." Randall Stone, a voice suddenly supplied from across the aisle. An elderly woman peered over her reading glasses. "I heard him on his phone earlier. He's with Stonebridge Capital." Lena went completely still. "Randall Stone from Stonebridge Capital," she clarified, her voice taking on a new lethal edge. The elderly woman nodded. "That's right. He made sure everyone knew it." A strange expression crossed Lena's face. Recognition followed by something almost like grim satisfaction. "Ms. Carter, where is Mr. Stone seated now?"
"Row 28F, Naomi replied.
"Do you know him?" "Not personally," Lena said, her mind clearly racing. "But my firm, Vance, Ruiz, and Davies, successfully represented 6 plaintiffs against Stonebridge Capital last year in a racial discrimination lending case. I led the litigation team." Understanding dawned on Naomi's face. "This wasn't random." "Possibly not," Lena agreed, "which makes it premeditated assault with potential hate crime enhancements." Even from a distance, the flash of recognition and alarm on Randall Stone's face, now seated at the back, was unmistakable when he glimpsed Lena. "He knows exactly who we are," Lena confirmed quietly. "The depositions were contentious, He was forced to admit to discriminatory lending practices under oath. Elias looked between them, comprehension dawning. That's why he was so angry from the beginning. It wasn't just about the seat. No, Lena agreed, squeezing his shoulder gently. It wasn't just about the seat. She turned back to Naomi. I need to speak with the captain and air marshal immediately. This changes everything. As if confirming her assessment, Randall was now on his phone despite the prohibitions against cell usage, his urgent whispers carrying an unmistakable note of panic. The coincidence of finding himself seated beside the son of the attorney who had humiliated him professionally had triggered a vindictiveness in Randall Stone. Now, faced with the unforeseen consequence of Lena's presence, his calculated intimidation of a child had transformed into something with potentially serious legal repercussions. I want to see all documentation you've gathered. Ms. Carter, Lena told Naomi. And I need statements from any witnesses before we land. As they spoke, Chris approached again, his expression troubled. The captain wants to know what's happening. There are complaints from several passengers about disruptions. Excellent, Lena replied before Naomi could speak. Please inform the captain that there will be law enforcement officers meeting this flight due to an assault on a minor, possible hate crime, and what appears to be witness intimidation currently in progress. She gestured toward Randall, who was now moving through the cabin, approaching passengers who had witnessed the incident. Speaking intensely to each one, Chris blanched. I'll relay the message. The atmosphere in the cabin had transformed from passive discomfort to charged anticipation. Word had spread rapidly about Randall's background and Lena's identity, creating a narrative far more compelling than a simple coffee spill. Passengers who had remained silent now processed their complicity differently in light of the new context. An elderly white woman with immaculately coiffed silver hair approached row 8. She pressed a business card into Naomi's hand. Eleanor Davies, she introduced herself quietly. Retired federal judge, Second Circuit Court of Appeals. I witnessed the entire incident and would be willing to provide testimony. That was no accident, young man. I should have spoken up immediately, and I apologize for my hesitation. Thank you. Your Honor. Lena accepted the card with a grateful nod. A teenage girl with purple-tipped hair leaned across from row 7. Ms. Carter, I have a video, not of the actual spill, but right after when that guy was claiming Elias bumped him. You can totally see it's a lie from how the coffee splashed. I recorded it. You recorded it? Naomi asked, surprised. The girl nodded. I've been documenting microaggressions for my social studies project. I never expected to capture something this extreme. From across the aisle, an Asian man in a business suit who had earlier remained conspicuously silent now cleared his throat. Min Park Global Investments. I saw everything. The man deliberately tilted his cup when the boy reached for his pencil. I should have said something immediately. Beside him, his white colleague nodded. I'll corroborate that. It was $100% intentional. The growing coalition of witnesses seemed to embolden others. Chris, who had earlier suggested letting it go, now approached with an affected look of concern. I've been thinking about the passenger's behavior during boarding, he announced loudly. He seemed noticeably intoxicated. I probably should have alerted you earlier, Naomi. Lena and Naomi exchanged knowing glances at this transparent attempt to position himself on the right side of a situation that had clearly shifted. Expedient allies were still allies, however, so Naomi merely nodded. Please include that in your statement, Chris. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our initial descent into New York. We are approximately 90 minutes from landing at JFK International. The announcement triggered a flurry of activity as witnesses hurried to provide contact, information, and preliminary statements before returning to their seats. Randall, observing the growing coalition from the back, was now engaged in an intense phone conversation despite repeated reminders about electronic device restrictions. Need someone waiting at the gate? Passengers nearby overheard him saying urgently, Yes, the Vance woman from the lending case. She's here with her kid. It's complicated. Call Marcus in legal and have him. Naomi was called to the cockpit shortly afterward. The Captain Reynolds looked troubled. Carter, I just received a direct radio communication from Atlantic Airways Chief of Operations. He informed her grimly. Highly unusual procedure. What did they want, sir? They've issued explicit instructions. No authorities are to be involved in what they're calling a customer service misunderstanding. Randall Stone is to be personally escorted to the VIP lounge upon landing. He hesitated. And you're to report immediately to the station manager's office. Naomi's stomach tightened. They're preemptively discrediting me, she stated flatly. Appears that way, Reynolds sighed. Look, I've documented your incident report according to protocol. Beyond that, my hands are tied. 29 years till retirement, mortgage, 2 kids in college. I understand, sir. As Naomi returned to the cabin, she passed Randall, who now wore a smug expression of triumph. He'd obviously been informed of the company's intervention. Back in row 8, Naomi quickly relayed the development to Lena. Classic playbook, Lena noted without surprise. Isolate witnesses, offer incentives for silence, and control the narrative. My phone will be confiscated the moment we land, Naomi predicted. Eleanor Davies, the retired judge, leaned forward. Use mine, she offered, passing her smartphone. I still have contacts in the Eastern District. And unlike these corporate types, federal judges serve lifetime appointments. I'm not afraid of their pressure tactics. Lena quickly composed messages to both TSA and Port Authority police, detailing the assault and the apparent corporate conspiracy to obstruct investigation. She included Elias's photos in the teenager's video, which had been transferred to the judge's phone. Sent, she confirmed. Now we wait. As the aircraft began its final approach, they could see multiple airport vehicles gathered near their assigned gate. Not standard protocol for a routine arrival. Mom, Elias whispered, noticing Lena's tension. What's going to happen? Justice, I hope, but it might get complicated first. Naomi watched through the cockpit window during landing. Atlantic Airways executives in dark suits stood alongside security personnel. Containment, not protection. Randall straightened his tie, his confidence renewed. The system designed to protect men like him was visibly mobilizing right on schedule. The moment Naomi was escorted from the office, the corporate counterattack began to crumble. Not through force, but through visibility. The calculated extraction of Randall Stone, meant to shield him from consequences, was now the very footage that would seal his fate. The climax arrived when airport police attempted to separate Elias from Lena for routine questioning. Standing in full view of gathering media and passengers, Lena's voice projected clearly. My 11-year-old son is a victim who has sustained burns requiring medical attention. Any questioning will occur with his legal guardian present, with a victim's advocate, and after he receives proper medical care as required by New York state law regarding minor victims. When the officer hesitated, she continued, additionally, as the assailant appears to be receiving preferential treatment and expedited departure from the terminal, I am formally requesting that law enforcement secure all relevant security footage immediately to prevent evidence tampering. Nearby passengers, many recording with their phones, erupted in support. The public spectacle had transformed the power dynamic completely, rendering corporate damage control tactics not just ineffective, but actively damaging to the airline's reputation. Outside, Randall Stone was intercepted by 2 federal officers as he reached the black SUV. The executive's protests about valued customer privacy fell on deaf ears as the officers explained that all passengers were required to complete proper immigration procedures before leaving the terminal. As Randall was escorted back inside, his face now visible on multiple news broadcasts, the corporate protection that had seemed so certain began dissolving around him. The system designed to shield men like him had encountered something it couldn't easily neutralize. The unfiltered truth, documented and witnessed by dozens, spreading faster than any corporate communications team could contain. Naomi Carter, finally released from airline custody after providing her statement to federal authorities, emerged from the terminal. She declined all interview requests, stating only that she had followed standard safety protocols to protect a passenger in her care. As cameras followed her departure, Naomi caught Lena's eye across the terminal. They exchanged a brief nod of mutual respect. 2 women who had independently chosen principle over expediency, despite knowing the likely professional cost. The days following the coffee incident brought a coordinated campaign of institutional retaliation. The systems designed to protect power rarely surrender without deploying their considerable resources. Naomi received formal notice of administrative leave pending investigation from Atlantic Airways, citing violation of customer privacy protocols. Her personnel file mysteriously acquired fabricated customer complaints, painting her as confrontational rather than stellar. 3 days after the flight, she returned home to find her missing laptop and backup phone, the only valuables taken in a coincidental, random theft. Meanwhile, Randall Stone's corporate machinery had activated. Stonebridge Capital issued a statement, suggesting their executive had been unfairly vilified for an unfortunate accident, leveraging vague claims about current social tensions. Most disturbing was the coordinated attack on Lena and Elias. Tabloid websites received information about an expunged misdemeanor charge from Lena's college days, strategically leaked to question her credibility. More insidiously, anonymous educational experts began questioning Elias's chess scholarship, suggesting diversity priorities influenced selection. The academic competition he was supposed to attend faced intense scrutiny, and online threats forced Elias to withdraw from the tournament for safety concerns. "This is how the system works," Lena explained to Elias. "When traditional power is challenged, it responds by attacking credibility, changing narratives, and creating distractions." "It's not fair," Elias observed. "No, it's not," Lena agreed. "But it's predictable, and predictable means plannable." Lena's firm immediately filed for emergency injunctions to preserve all evidence and submitted formal complaints to regulatory agencies about obstruction. Then the settlement offers began arriving, substantial financial packages requiring absolute confidentiality and withdrawal of all complaints. "They're hoping to make this disappear," Naomi observed during a meeting with Lena. "Money is how they measure the cost of continued discrimination," Lena confirmed. "If the settlement is cheaper than changing their culture, the behavior continues." Through careful research, they uncovered disturbing patterns. Randall Stone had similar incidents on other airlines, all quietly resolved. Atlantic Airways itself had a troubling history of discrimination complaints, nearly all resolved through confidential settlements that prevented public pattern recognition. The system wasn't just protecting Randall Stone, it was protecting itself. The pressure mounted, but an unexpected counterforce was developing. The teenager's viral video had sparked a movement. Other Atlantic Airways employees anonymously shared similar experiences. Judge Eleanor Davies lent her gravitas to the discussion, speaking about systemic issues. 2 weeks after the flight, Min Park, the investment banker, published a detailed first-person account on a major financial news site. "What I observed was not a misunderstanding," he wrote. "It was a deliberate act followed by an equally deliberate corporate effort to obstruct accountability. We cannot claim to value integrity while remaining silent about its absence." The combined weight of these voices created something the system hadn't anticipated. A coalition too diverse to be easily discredited and too distributed to be silenced. "They're used to fighting individuals," Lena explained to Elias. "A single employee, a single passenger. Those are manageable. But when patterns become visible, and witnesses refuse to be isolated, the math changes." By week 3, the narrative had shifted from a disputed incident to questions about systemic problems within airline culture. Congressional staffers began making inquiries. 3 months after the coffee incident, a congressional hearing room buzzed with anticipation. Naomi Carter sat at the witness table, poised and professional. Beside her, Lena Vance reviewed her testimony. "The incident on Flight 2143 was not isolated," Naomi testified, her voice steady. "It was merely visible. Most discriminatory incidents occur without witnesses willing or able to document them. Most employees who report such incidents face exactly what I experienced: systematic retaliation designed to discredit and silence. Rather than accepting Atlantic Airways' eventual reinstatement offer, which required confidentiality, Naomi had accepted a position heading a newly created passenger advocacy office within the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. Lena's testimony focused on the legal structures that enabled corporate concealment. The current system of confidential settlements and mandatory arbitration creates perfect conditions for continued misconduct. Most compelling was Elias's testimony. "When that coffee burned my skin, it hurt," he told the committee. "But when everyone pretended not to see what happened, that hurt more. It taught me something no 12-year-old should have to learn: that some people's comfort matters more than other people's pain. Randall Stone was notably absent. Following the release of cabin surveillance footage, he faced criminal charges for assault and filing false reports. Stonebridge Capital quietly accepted his resignation. The hearings produced tangible outcomes. The Atlantic Airways CEO resigned, and the airline adopted comprehensive new anti-discrimination policies. Most significantly, the industry faced new regulatory requirements for documenting and addressing discrimination complaints without automatic confidentiality provisions. 6 months after the flight, Naomi, Lena, and Elias gathered in Washington, D.C. for the signing of the Safe Skies for All Act, which established an independent review board for transportation discrimination incidents and whistleblower protections for employees. After the formal signing ceremony, Elias was invited to make brief remarks. Standing at the podium, he looked out at the assembled officials and media. One cup of coffee revealed a broken system. He stated simply, "Imagine what else we'll fix once we truly see each other." The journey from row 8 of Flight 2143 to this moment had been neither easy nor without cost. Naomi had surrendered a career she loved but gained a platform to transform it. Lena had faced professional intimidation but expanded her firm's impact. Elias had lost a chess championship opportunity but gained a profound understanding of both injustice and the courage required to confront it. As they left the Capitol, a reporter called out asking if they felt they had received justice. Naomi considered the question carefully. "Justice isn't something you receive," she replied. "It's something you build, decision by decision, stand by stand, day by day. We've laid a foundation." The building continues. Behind them, visible through the Capitol windows, flights continued crossing the Washington sky, their passengers and crews now operating under rules that acknowledged a simple truth. Dignity isn't a privilege for some, but a right for all, even at 30,000 feet. This story powerfully illustrates that courage is not a grand gesture, but a series of small decisions to stand firm when compromise seems easier. The breakthrough came not from a single heroic stand, but from a coalition of diverse voices refusing to be silenced separately. What moment in your life tested your courage to stand up against injustice? Have you ever witnessed discrimination and chosen to speak up or remain silent? We'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that examine the complex realities of discrimination and the courage required to combat it. Share this video with someone who might need encouragement to stand firm in their own challenging situation. Remember that systemic change happens through collective action. Your voice matters more than you might realize. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply refuse to look away when others do. Thank you for watching, and may we all find the strength to be like Naomi, Lena, and Elias when our own moments of truth arrive.